Wuthering Waves 2.0 is here, and it's shaping out to be a spectacle of an update taking place in Resonator based on the land of pasta. Doubtless everyone has seen the 2.0 special program that came out a week and change ago, and on that note, Happy New Year to you all. Hope everyone had a great holidays. Kudo's got some interesting stuff in the works for us, and I plan to release a ton of content about it, so I hope you're looking forward to kicking off the first month of 2025 with it. Back to business though, as per tradition, with every new version comes a new 5-star, and the first one we're going to be talking about for today is Carlotta, a 5-star glacial pistol user, which makes her the first 5-star gun user in WuWa and the first limited gun user to come out since the game's inception. For today, we'll be discussing Carlotta's abilities, detailing how she works, her main attack rotation, how she stacks up against the competition, and of course, if it's worth going after her or not. Of the 5 weapon types in WuWa at the moment, guns were the one I'm sure most people were interested in, seeing as stuff like swords and gauntlets are pretty commonplace in hack and slash games. I myself found Chisha's gameplay to be quite enjoyable at the start, mostly from her ability to move around while attacking, and even suspend herself in the air to free fire. But over time, the flaws of the weapon type became apparent, not the least of which being their practically worthless aim shot mode being an undesigned replacement of what should be a heavy attack. There's also a more niche problem with their aerial suspension, making it difficult for them to land without swapping to a character whose mid-air attack is a plunge. For example, Mortefi is unable to use either a skill or liberation while mid-air. Minor nitpicks at most, considering Mortefi rarely if ever is in the air, but overall the gun category hasn't been doing too hot compared to its peers, which might be the reason why they haven't released a new character for it. That is, until now. With the release of Carlotta, many quality of life changes were implemented to remove any potential for disruption. For example, her aim shot, or rather lack thereof. Carlotta's aim shot has been omitted in favor of a traditional heavy attack, and secondarily her mid-air attack is also just a regular downward plunge. Small scale they may be, these changes allow her to be a far more responsive and intuitive attacker, letting you execute her combo game without having to be concerned about unnecessarily being in the air or pressing your left click for a millisecond too long. In fact, part of her rotation actually requires you to use a mid-air attack. Let's go through skill first, consisting of 2 parts. The first cast has Carlotta fire a single shot at a target enemy, stunning them in place for 1.5 seconds and preventing them from doing anything. It should be noted that this does not count as an interruption. Dispersion is basically the equivalent of stopping time on the target, so after it wears off, they continue accordingly. That being said, just like how Spectral Rover's outro was touted in the early game for being very helpful for a wide number of situations, Carlotta's skill 1 will have the same connotation. A second and a half in a Twitch-based game is a lot longer than you think. The second cast of her skill then has her dash and jump over a target and fire a volley of shots on them, consuming all multiple crystals in the process. We'll get into that in just a moment. From this point onward, Carlotta is in the air for a brief moment, during which you can buffer a mid-air attack to have her crash down. Heavily recommended to do so, as one of her passive abilities makes her invincible to all hostile effects during this time. In other words, timing her skill 1 and skill 2 affords you the chance to avoid critical enemy attacks. It's a very stylish attack befitting of her stylish appearance. Onto her Forte circuit, there are technically 2 resources, one of which is used to charge up the other. First resource is the aforementioned multiple crystal, which can be accumulated through attacks, skills, and dodging. Multiple crystals can be consumed either by using her basic attacks while holding them, or through her skill. Despite her basic attacks also consuming crystals, you generally never want a basic attack with her during her rotation. Instead, you should rely on her skill to consume them. Doing so will then fill up her second resource, known as Substance, her actual Forte gauge. At full gauge, you can input a heavy attack to have her do her Forte empowered attack, dealing staggering amounts of damage, refunding a small portion of her skill cooldown, as well as entering the final bow state, causing all shots of her liberation to deal 1.8 times more damage. By the way, both her Forte empowered attack and all shots from her liberation count as skill damage, so Carlotta is exclusively a skill damage attacker, kind of like Chun-Li. She can only use her Forte empowered attack and therefore enter the final bow state every 22 seconds, so Carlotta has a minimum rotation cooldown of 22, but in practice it's around a 28-second cooldown between rotations, give or take. Essentially, you build up multiple crystals to then build substance to then activate her Forte circuit. Make sense? Good. Now let's talk about the coup de grace of her kit. Might just be the League of Legends brain rot in me, but I can't help but feel as if Carlotta's liberation is a love letter to Jhin and Lucian. You can all see it, right? Carlotta's ultimate opens up with a blast of glacial damage to all enemies, applying a debuff on them for 4 seconds that causes all of Carlotta's attacks to ignore 18% of the target's defense. It's only 4 seconds because her other inherent skill makes it so her intro skill, Resonant skill 2, Forte empowered attack, and each bullet of her ultimate also apply this debuff, making it so she effectively deals 18% partial true damage at all times. She then enters the Twilight Tango state, replacing her basic attack and liberation for the next 10 seconds. Inputting either of them has her fire a volley of shots to the nearest enemy, and after using it 4 times, she has a finishing bullet that deals ultra damage. Something to note is that while you can't use anything except her liberation attacks during this time, you're still able to walk around, jump, swap to other characters and whatnot, although it's highly discouraged to swap out during this time since her final bout state cancels if you do so. Simply put, Carlotta's ultimate has her fire 4 shots and then a 5th massive one. You can move around between shots and even buffer a dash after a shot based on the direction you're holding. In other words, you can strafe on this character, which is awesome. So in light of Carlotta's Forte empowering her ultimate, which in and of itself does a ton of damage, as an attacker most of her DPS is backloaded with a good deal of setup required to maximize her damage. She's not hard to play, mind you, but it's reminiscent of Camellia, where the real strength of her kit is after you charge up her stuff. That being said, Carlotta's overall rotation is pretty intuitive. Here's a recommended attack pattern for you to go by. Start by opening with her, use her skill 1 and skill 2, then use her echo active and swap out to your supports, which I'll talk about later. Do your thing on your supports, then switch back to Carlotta for her intro skill, then use her skill 1, skill 2, and then mid-air attack to hit the ground quickly. 1 intro and 2 rounds of her skill should be enough for her to have a full Forte gauge. Then you'll want to use her Forte empowered attack and then go to her ultimate. Press it 5 times and there you go, that's a rotation. You can then prepare for the next rotation by using her skill 1 and 2, then echo and swap out and begin the cycle anew. Thanks to the stun on her skill 1 and the invincibility on her skill 2, the odds of Carlotta getting interrupted during her combo are very low. Also, despite being backloaded, her rotation is technically one of the faster ones in the game if we count by total time on field, just short enough to where you can squeeze her combo within the duration of an outro skill buff like JoJo's. On that note, Carlotta's intro and outro themselves are really nothing special, just attacks of their own. The intro is good in that it fills up the Forte relatively quickly and applies 18% defense ignore debuff, while the outro just shits out damage on her way out. More if you have her sequences, which is the next part of her kit to go through. By this point, Kodo's gotten pretty formulaic when it comes to sequences on 5 stars, and Carlotta is no exception. S1 provides her with 12.5% bonus crit rate when attacking anyone affected by deconstruction, essentially giving her a passive 12.5% bonus crit rate. At the same time, she increases her substance generation while attacking a stunned enemy with her skill, good for speeding up her charge time to make her more consistent. S2 causes the finishing blow of her liberation to deal 2.26 times more damage, though it is a huge boost to her backloaded pressure. Considering it's only on the final shot of her ultimate, in objectivity, it's not quite as enormous as it appears. S3 however is the difference maker, causing her outro skill to do an insane amount of extra damage, over 1000% to be exact, meaning her outro goes from doing 790 to over 1800%. Alongside that, her skill 1 and 2 both deal 93% more damage. Apart from her S6, Carlotta's S3 is the biggest leap in her overall DPS, so if you have intentions to spend extra on her, this would be a good stopping point. S4 is the common sight on DPS characters. They have one for Shangli Yao and Camellia too, where you just randomly give the entire party a support buff. In this case, Carlotta increases your team's skill damage. S5 makes the Forte empowered attack do 47% more damage, bringing the ratio from like 800% to almost 1200. Not too shabby, but I mean we're talking 6 copies of Carlotta to get this. It's not really something to aim for unless you plan to go all the way with her. S6 of course though is the creme de la creme. The first 4 shots of Carlotta's liberation do 2.86 times their base damage, and more crucially, each one will apply the 1.5 second stun from her skill. Full sequence Carlotta effectively lets you cheese any boss you want, given she practically has a cumulative 7.5 second stun in her kit. No need to dodge or do anything, the boss is completely paralyzed. DPS wise, depending on what your supports are, sequences, weapon investment, and whatnot, Carlotta currently ranks among the apex tiers of the metagame right now, placing her squarely alongside Camellia and Jinxi. While the other two clearly have the advantage of area coverage, Carlotta far outstrips either of them in boss killing. So depending on circumstance, you can make a convincing argument that she's the best DPS in the game. Definitely a commendable spot to be in for the first character of 2.0, especially considering we don't have a strong glacial DPS yet. No offense to Ling Yangnings of course. To be clear, Carlotta is almost exclusively a single target attacker. She technically does have AoE in that her attacks can strike multiple targets if they're close enough, but realistically you should treat her as if she attacks only one person at a time. A great boss killer, but you will need someone else if you're fighting waves of enemies. Playstyle wise, in the time I tested her out, she feels great and really easy to play, flashy and explosive with a lot of finesse to her, and she already has a phenomenal teammate to work with. On that note, let's get to her teams and equips before wrapping up the video. Starting with equips. Weapon is obviously her signature, the Last Dance. 72% crit damage on main stat, 12% attack on passive, and every time you use intro skill or liberation you get 48% bonus skill damage for 5 seconds. It's a short duration, but let me remind you, Carlotta can cast her ultimate effectively 6 times, a huge boost to her DPS and definitely worth the investment. That being said, Static Mist is not too far off. Crit rate main stat complemented by a higher base attack line and some nice energy regen. The swap out is not really all that beneficial to her, it's mostly a stat stick, but a good one. The best 4-star weapon is a split between either R5 Thunderbolt or the new Romance and Farewell accompanying version 2, also R5. The former gives a stacking skill damage bonus, and the latter gives bonus attack when damaging enemies affected by debuffs, of which if you recall, Carlotta has 2, the stun and defense ignore. She can easily max out new Romance's passive. If you have the funds though, her signature weapon is without question the best way to go. Prioritize Carlotta's gun over her S1. S0R1 for budget spenders, and S2R1 is a good sweet spot for any Dolphin players. Being the first limited gun user since the game came out, our options for 5-star guns are few and far between. As for echoes, you want to give her one of the new sets, Frosty Resolve, as it gives bonus glacial and skill damage. Not only does Carlotta make use of both, but the skill boost part can be stacked. At present, she's the only one who can make full use of this echo set, given she's the only skill damage glacial user at the moment with a multicast on her liberation. With that said, the new Sentry construct is a good fit for her main echo, as simply holding the echo, like just having it equipped, gives bonus glacial and skill damage to the character. They made the buffs guaranteed instead of having to activate it. The echo cooldown also resets upon filling up its own gauge, which can be done so by casting liberations. Once more, a perfect fit for Carlotta who spams liberation over and over. Main style-wise, either crit option on a 4 cost, glacial damage on 3 cost, and attack on 1 cost. If you have her signature weapon, you could sub out 1 3 cost for an attack percent, but the difference is negligible. For substats, either crit stat, then energy, then attack, and then skill damage. Very standard build. Team-wise, I mean, come on, it's obvious, JoJo. She's literally getting a rerun alongside Carlotta, and I would actually recommend getting JoJo over Carlotta Sequences if you don't have her. JoJo's outro skill is a match made in heaven for Carlotta, and with the latter spreading her damage across many attacks, you can get a ton of applications of the form's liberation. If you can't get JoJo or don't want to get her, S6 Sanhua isn't the worst option out there. She doesn't do anything for you in terms of outro obviously, but compared to Talchi and Lumi, she does a lot more damage if you gear her up. As you can see from the chart on screen, Carlotta deals a bit less damage, but Sanhua contributes noticeably higher personal damage. That being said, you can still go Talchi and Lumi for their outros. I prefer Talchi primarily because their outro is 14 seconds long compared to Lumi only being 10. Bear in mind your Sanhua has to be well geared up, 5-star weapon included. For healer, you can make do with the usual Shorekeeper and Verena, but I would argue the free crit rate on Shorekeeper's ultimate comes in handy for reaching that 100% breakpoint on Carlotta. That and being a skill issue player, I am a fan of her outro's dodge forgiveness, so go for Shorekeeper first and foremost. By the way, if you have S6 Baito, she could potentially do more for you than Verena courtesy of the bonus glacial damage boosting both Carlotta and JoJo's DPS, the one time where Baito is actually optimal. All in all, Carlotta is a great first member of WuWa's version 2 cast. They made an echo set just for her, a main echo just for her, she has 3 backup units who can work with her nicely, and her DPS is on par with the best in the game at the moment. I am glad though that they prioritized a well put together design and gameplay. I think that matters a lot more than just having big PP numbers. Anyway, that wraps up my assessment of Carlotta. Hope you guys enjoyed, and as always, let me know your thoughts on her in the comments down below, as well as if you're gonna pull for her or not. For the time being though, if you enjoyed the video, a like and subscribe would be much appreciated. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Vars, join my Discord server, and check out my other character first impressions videos if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.